He built a cave shelter that stayed 87 degrees up all winter. No firewood needed picture. It is January of 1948, and the temperature in Rutland County, Vermont, has plunged to 15 degrees below zero. It's the kind of biting cold that freezes your breath into delicate crystals before it even leaves your lips. The kind of cold that is lethally dangerous. In farmhouses across the county, families are huddled tightly around their hearths, their firewood supplies dwindling at an alarming rate, watching plumes of their own breath mist up inside their dwellings. Most households are fortunate to maintain a mere 50 degrees Fahrenheit in their main living areas. Children are forced to sleep bundled in their outerwear, while the elderly wrap themselves in every available blanket, only to awaken still shivering. Yet, there is one residence that stands apart from this widespread hardship. It is perched atop a modest elevation, approximately 4 miles north of the town center. This peculiar structure has been the subject of neighborhood amusement for close to a year. One portion of it is a curved metal dome, reminiscent of something found on a military installation. The other half of the dwelling is submerged into the earth, anchored by a foundation of stones that are a century old. Within this unusual abode, a man named Callum Renfield is moving about in a simple T-shirt. The thermometer mounted on his wall displays a comfortable 70 degrees Fahrenheit. His wood-burning stove operates at a gentle, consistent pace, consuming perhaps a quarter of the fuel his neighbors are frantically shoveling into their own stoves merely to survive. Outside, the wind wails like a creature in distress. Inside, his 2 daughters are playing quietly on the floor, while his wife, Phoebe, reads a book by the window, so at ease that she has shed her sweater. The neighbors used to refer to Callum as the crazy orphan. They would place wagers on the eventual collapse of his bizarre house. They would chuckle whenever they passed his property and observed him laboring on that peculiar sunken structure, topped with its seemingly military-grade roof. No one is laughing now. Presently they are at his doorstep, pleading to be admitted inside. This is the chronicle of a 14-year-old boy, cast out into a blizzard, who grew to construct the warmest dwelling in all of Vermont. It's a narrative woven from knowledge passed down through generations, from the profound wisdom of ancient practices, and from a grandfather's enduring love that transcended his passing. And it all commences with a letter secreted within a wooden box. The bitter night. 21 years prior, in December of 1927, a boy named Callum Renfield stood in the doorway of the only home he had ever known, witnessing his father's face contort with fury. Callum was 14 years old, slender for his age, with dark hair that perpetually fell across his brow, and eyes that, over 8 long years, had learned the art of silent observation. He had acquired this harsh lesson within the confines of a house where he was not truly wanted. His mother, Lenora, had succumbed when he was 6 years old to a pulmonary affliction that began as a mere cough and concluded with her gasping for air in a bed his father refused to have a physician attend. Desmond Renfield was too engrossed in gambling away their meager resources to procure medicinal care. 2 years after Lenora's demise, Desmond remarried. His new wife, Prudence, introduced her own child into the household, a son whom she doted upon while treating Callum as little more than a menial servant. For 6 years, Callum had slept in the woodshed. He had subsisted on whatever meager scraps remained after the family had concluded their meals. He had toiled from dawn until dusk, felling wood, transporting water, cleaning stables, all while his stepbrother enjoyed his leisure. He had learned the futility of complaint. It only exacerbated his circumstances. Yet, on this December evening, as snow began to fall and the temperature plummeted towards freezing, Callum found himself accused of a transgression he had not committed. $20 had vanished from Prudence's purse. She insisted she had witnessed Callum purloin it. The truth, which Callum knew but could never substantiate, was that she had appropriated the money herself to purchase Christmas gifts for her own son. Desmond's breath reeked of whiskey. His eyes were bloodshot and unfocused. His hand gripped the doorframe as if it were the sole element sustaining him. "You are not of my blood," Desmond slurred. "Never were. Your mother's mistake. That's what you are. Get out, and never return." Callum offered no protest. He had long since comprehended that arguing with his father was an exercise in futility. He simply turned and walked out into the swirling snow. However, as he passed through the kitchen, he snatched one item, a small wooden box that had belonged to his mother. It was the sole possession of hers that had not been sold or discarded. He had kept it concealed within the woodshed for 8 years, occasionally retrieving it at night simply to hold something that her hands had touched. The door slammed shut behind him. The snow was intensifying now, falling in thick flakes that stung his face and melted upon his thin shirt. He had no coat, no provisions, no currency. He was 14 years old, alone in a Vermont winter, clutching only a wooden box against his chest. The letter that saved a life. He walked. He had no destination in mind, only the unyielding conviction that to cease walking was to embrace death. The cold seeped into his very bones. His fingers grew numb, followed by his toes. The snow accumulated, reaching past his ankles, then his knees. The wind sliced through his shirt as if it were non-existent. After an hour, he could scarcely feel his legs. After 2 hours, coherent thought became an insurmountable challenge. He stumbled into a copse of trees and collapsed onto his knees in the snow. His body was succumbing to the elements. He could sense it happening, a strange warmth permeating his limbs, a warmth that even at 14 he recognized as the prelude to death. With fingers that barely responded, he opened his mother's wooden box. He wasn't sure what he sought. Perhaps solace, a final connection to the only person who had ever truly loved him. Within the box, he discovered a letter. The paper was aged and brittle, the handwriting faded, yet still legible in the dim light filtering through the snow-laden branches above. "My dearest Callum," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then I'm no longer with you, and I am so sorry. I am sorry for leaving you in that house with that man. I am sorry for not being strong enough to take you away." Callum's vision blurred with tears that froze upon his cheeks. "But there is something you must know. You have a grandfather, my father. His name is Tobias Ashford, and he lives on a farm 4 miles north of Rutland. He loves you, Callum. He has always loved you. But your father forbade him from seeing you, because my father would not lend him money for his gambling. Your father told him you were dead." Callum's heart began to pound, propelling blood through his frozen body. "Find your grandfather, my son. He will protect you. There is a map in this box. Follow it, and know that even though I cannot be with you, I have never stopped loving you, not for a single moment." Beneath the letter lay a hand-drawn map and a small brass key. Callum gazed at the map. North, 4 miles north. He doubted his ability to traverse 4 miles in this frigid expanse. He questioned if he could even take 4 more steps, but he stood nonetheless, for he now possessed something previously absent: hope. The ensuing 3 hours constituted the longest of Callum's young life. He trudged through snow that, in places, reached his thighs. He fell more times than he could tally. He lost all sensation in his hands and feet. He spoke aloud to himself, then to his mother, and finally to a grandfather he had never met, imploring them all to grant him the strength to continue. The map guided him along a frozen creek, past a lightning-scarred oak, and through a breach in a stone wall. And then, just as he was convinced he could endure no further, he beheld it, a small farmhouse with smoke curling from its chimney, a warm yellow light emanating from its windows. He managed to reach within 50 feet of the front door before his legs finally gave way. The last sensation he registered before succumbing to unconsciousness was the sound of a dog barking. The grandfather's wisdom Callum awoke to warmth. That was his initial awareness, genuine warmth. Not the deceptive heat of a body shutting down, but the authentic radiance of a fire and the insulating embrace of walls that kept the cold at bay. He lay in a bed, a proper bed with a feather mattress and a generous pile of quilts. A fire crackled merrily in a stone fireplace across the room. And seated beside the bed, observing him with tears streaming down a weathered countenance, was an elderly gentleman. The man possessed white hair and deep-set eyes the color of storm clouds. His hands were large and calloused, the hands of someone who had dedicated his life to working with stone and timber. He appeared to be in his mid-70s, yet his gaze was remarkably sharp and clear. "You resemble her precisely," the old man whispered. "Just like my Lenora." Callum attempted to speak, but his throat was exceedingly dry. The old man raised a cup of warm broth to his lips. "Drink slowly. You have been asleep for 3 days." 3 days? Callum drank, feeling the comforting warmth spread through his chest. "I am your grandfather," the old man stated. "Tobias Ashford. I have been searching for you for 8 years. And then he began to recount the truth. The truth, as Tobias divulged it, was more grim than Callum could have ever conceived. Desmond Renfield had wed Lenora for a singular purpose. He harbored the belief that her father was a man of considerable wealth. Upon discovering that Tobias was merely a skilled stonemason with a modest farm and limited savings, Desmond's disappointment festered into deep-seated resentment. When Lenora fell ill, Tobias implored permission to assist. He offered to cover the expenses of physicians, medication, and any intervention that might preserve his daughter's life. Desmond adamantly refused, citing pride. "A man cares for his own family," he declared. Lenora perished within that very household, surrounded by individuals who possessed the means to save her, but chose not to. Following her death, Tobias attempted to visit his grandson. He would arrive at the house once a month, bearing gifts, requesting only a few moments with the boy. Each occasion, Desmond rebuffed him. Each time, the pretexts became more elaborate, until finally Desmond informed him that Callum had succumbed to the same malady that had claimed his mother. Tobias spent 3 years mourning a grandson who was, in fact, alive and enduring hardship mere miles away. When he eventually learned the truth from a neighbor who mentioned observing the Renfield boy laboring in the fields, Tobias attempted again. However, by then, Desmond had relocated the family to the opposite side of Rutland. He continued to move, always remaining one step ahead of the old man's persistent efforts to locate them. "I retained investigators," Tobias recounted, his voice laden with profound regret. "I dispatched letters to every community in Vermont. I never ceased my search, but your father was adept at concealment." Callum absorbed all of this in contemplative silence. The anger he experienced was so immense that it left him bereft of words. "Why?" he finally inquired. "Did he despise you so intensely?" Tobias exhaled a weary sigh. "Because I refused to provide him with funds for his gambling. He requested $300. I informed him that I would not facilitate his self-destruction. He never absolved me." Callum contemplated the wooden box, the letter, the map that had, against all odds, saved his life. "My mother was aware," he stated softly. "She knew I might need to find you someday." Tobias nodded, fresh tears tracing paths down his wrinkled cheeks. "Your mother was the most discerning individual I have ever encountered. She must have penned that letter upon realizing her life was ebbing away. She was thinking of you even then, especially then." For a considerable period, neither man uttered a sound. Then Tobias extended his hand and clasped Callum's in his own. "You are safe now," he affirmed. "You are home." The ancient craft. The subsequent 19 years unfolded as the most joyful of Callum's existence. Tobias formally adopted him within the month, officially integrating him into the Ashford family. The farm became Callum's sanctuary, and Tobias transformed into the paternal figure he had never truly known. More significantly, Tobias became his mentor. The Ashford lineage had been comprised of stonemasons for 4 generations, their origins tracing back to Cornwall, England. They had erected churches, bridges, and grand residences, but their most exceptional aptitude lay in something far more practical: ensuring warmth. "Stone is a marvel," Tobias explained one afternoon, as they stood in the farmhouse basement. "The walls here were constructed of granite, 2 feet thick, meticulously fitted together without mortar, employing the ancient Cornish method. It absorbs thermal energy gradually, retains it for extended periods, and releases it slowly. This principle is termed thermal mass." He placed his palm against the stone wall. "Feel this." Callum touched the wall. It was cool, yet not frigid. Despite the howling January wind outside and temperatures dipping to 10 below zero, the basement maintained a comfortable 60 degrees. "The earth surrounding us remains at 50 to 55 degrees throughout the year," Tobias continued. "In summer, it cools us. In winter, it warms us. The stone walls capture any heat we introduce and store it like a reservoir. We require only a modest fire to compensate for the difference." He gestured around the basement, which served as the primary living space of the house. "Above us, the wooden floors and walls of the dwelling provide additional insulation. But down here, enveloped by stone and earth, we are shielded from winter's harshest extremities." Callum spent countless hours studying the basement's construction, the precise interrelation of the stones, the angles of the walls, and the placement of the small cast-iron stove that efficiently heated the entire area with minimal fuel consumption. Tobias revealed the family's journal, a leather-bound volume passed down through 4 generations. Within its pages were detailed diagrams and annotations concerning Cornish building techniques, precise measurements, and ratios, alongside hard-won wisdom on how to effectively ward off the cold. "Our ancestors endured winters that would overwhelm most modern individuals," Tobias remarked. not due to superior hardiness, but rather because they were more intelligent. They comprehended the earth. They collaborated with it, rather than opposing it. Over the ensuing years, Callum absorbed every lesson Tobias imparted. He mastered carpentry and masonry. He learned to interpret the subtle shifts in the land to forecast the weather. He cultivated patience, precision, and the quiet satisfaction derived from creating something enduring. He also discovered the profound meaning of familial love. Tobias never raised his voice, nor his hand. When Callum erred, Tobias patiently guided him in rectifying his mistakes. When Callum achieved success, Tobias offered unreserved commendation. For the first time in his life, Callum understood the true essence of a family. Love and loss. When Callum reached the age of 22, he met Phoebe. She was the daughter of a schoolteacher in Rutland, a young woman with hair the color of copper and a laugh that could banish any chill from a room. While not conventionally beautiful, there was an undeniable quality to her steadfastness, her innate kindness, and her refusal to tolerate foolishness that immediately captivated Callum. They married in 1938, when Callum was 25. They settled into a small cottage on Tobias's property, and for the next several years, their lives were filled with contentment. Clara was born in 1940, followed by Rosie in 1942. Also in 1942, Copper passed away. Copper had been Tobias's dog, a brown-coated hound with soulful eyes who had discovered Callum on that frigid night and barked relentlessly until Tobias investigated. The dog had lived an extraordinary 20 years, spending his final decade as Callum's devoted companion. They buried him beneath the oak tree near the property's edge, and Callum fashioned a simple stone marker inscribed Copper. First friend, best friend, 1922 to 1942. The war years progressed. Callum was deemed too old for conscription, and the farm was classified as essential for the war effort. Consequently, he remained at home, tending crops and livestock, and observing his daughter's growth. Tobias, meanwhile, aged. His hands, once so steady and strong, began to tremble. His gait became slower, and his eyes, though still sharp, developed a peculiar cloudiness that baffled medical professionals. In the spring of 1946, Tobias summoned Callum to his bedside. "I am departing this life," the old man stated plainly. "Do not attempt to dissuade me. I am acutely aware of my body's condition. I have experienced 95 good years, more than most men could ever hope for. And the final 19 of them, spent with you, Phoebe, and the girls, have been the most cherished of all. I harbor no fear. I am filled with gratitude." Tears streamed down Callum's face. This man had not only saved his life, but had imparted all his accumulated wisdom and offered love when no one else had. "There is something I must impart to you," Tobias continued. "Something I have awaited the opportune moment to share, until I was certain you were prepared." He gestured towards the desk situated in the corner of the room. "Within the drawer you will find my will. The farm and all its land are yours, but there is an additional parcel of 5 acres, situated 5 miles north of here, upon which rests something exceptional." Callum was familiar with the property. He had traversed past it on numerous occasions, an overgrown field where the remnants of a stone foundation were discernible amidst the weeds. "That foundation was erected by my grandfather in 1848, Tobias explained. "It represents the finest craftsmanship the Ashford family ever produced. The dwelling that once stood atop it was consumed by fire in 1892, but the basement endured. I have preserved it, awaiting the opportune individual to construct something truly worthy upon its base." He extended his hand and clasped Callum's with surprising vigor. "Build the house I never could," Tobias whispered. "Employ every lesson I have imparted. Demonstrate to them that the ancient methods still possess profound value. Promise me, Callum." Callum promised. 3 days later, Tobias Ashford passed away peacefully in his sleep. The challenge. The reading of the will convened in the office of Frederick Ashworth, a legal professional in Rutland, who was a distant kinsman of the Ashford family. Callum sat quietly as the lawyer perused the standard provisions: the farm, the livestock, the modest savings account. All of it, as anticipated, was bequeathed to Callum. However, as the lawyer reached the concluding section, his voice adopted a somber cadence. "To my grandson Callum, I also bequeath the 5-acre property designated as the Ashford North Parcel, inclusive of the stone foundation meticulously constructed thereon. I bequeath to him the family journal, containing 4 generations of building expertise, and I entrust him with this final message." The lawyer cleared his throat and read, "Callum, the foundation on that land represents the pinnacle of our family's architectural achievements. The stone walls are 2 feet thick, 8 feet deep, and as robust as the day they were meticulously assembled nearly 100 years ago. I harbored a lifelong aspiration to erect a dwelling upon it, a structure that would unequivocally validate the efficacy of the old Cornish methodologies. However, life presented me with divergent paths. Now I entrust that aspiration to you. Construct something extraordinary, something that will provide enduring warmth for your family across generations. And when the skeptics commence their derision, and they assuredly will, remember my consistent counsel. The stone possesses knowledge, the earth possesses knowledge, and ultimately they too will comprehend." Callum was dabbing at his eyes when the door to the lawyer's office was abruptly flung open. A portly gentleman, attired in an expensive coat, strode in, his face flushed with anger. Following him was a younger man, carrying a leather briefcase. "This will is invalid," the stout man declared emphatically. "I possess documentation substantiating my rightful claim to ownership of that property." Callum recognized him instantly. Howard Peaton, the wealthiest individual in Rutland County, proprietor of the largest building supply enterprise in the region, a man notorious for his ruthless business practices and his profound disdain for anyone he deemed inferior. "Mr. Peaton," the lawyer addressed him coolly, "this is a private proceeding." "Not any more," Peaton retorted, slapping a sheaf of papers onto the desk. "In 1925, Desmond Renfield signed over the rights to that property as security for a loan of $400. He never repaid the debt. The property is now mine." Callum felt the color drain from his face. His father. Even from beyond the grave, Desmond was attempting to strip him of everything. The lawyer meticulously examined the documents. For several long minutes, the sole audible element within the chamber was the gentle murmur of rustling paper. Presently Ashworth lifted his gaze, a subtle smile gracing his lips. "Mr. Peaton," he began, "these documents are utterly without value." Peaton's countenance flushed a deep crimson. "What utter nonsense are you spouting? These are legally binding." Desmond Renfield possessed no rightful authority to leverage this property as security, the attorney clarified. The Ashford North parcel was never designated as marital property. It belongs exclusively to Tobias Ashford, a legacy from his father, and was explicitly safeguarded from any claims by the husbands of the Ashford daughters. Desmond lacked the legal standing to encumber assets to which he had no claim. "That's preposterous. I shall pursue this through the courts." "You are most welcome to attempt it." The lawyer meticulously gathered the papers and returned them to Peaton. "However," he added, "I have undertaken a thorough investigation of this matter in anticipation of precisely this type of contention. The property now belongs to Callum Renfield. There is absolutely nothing you can do to alter this fact." Peaton snatched the documents, his face contorting with pure fury. He whirled toward Callum, thrusting a thick finger towards his chest. "You listen to me, you foundling. That property will eventually be mine. One way or another, you are destined to falter in whatever hair-brained scheme you intend to enact there. And when you do, I shall be standing by, ready to acquire the remnants for a pittance." With that, he stormed out, slamming the door with such force that the very windows vibrated. Callum remained seated in profound silence for an extended period. Then he turned to the attorney and stated softly, "I will require duplicate copies of all these legal instruments. I have a home to construct." Building the impossible. In April of 1947, Callum Renfield stood at the perimeter of his grandfather's northern estate, gazing down at the sturdy stone foundation that had patiently awaited nearly a century for habitation. The foundation presented as a rectangular structure, measuring approximately 20 feet by 24 feet, sunk 8 feet into the earth. Its walls were meticulously fashioned from granite blocks, each precisely shaped and fitted with remarkable skill in the traditional Cornish manner, eschewing any form of mortar. Decades of neglect had permitted debris, fallen branches, accumulated soil, and the tenacious roots of adjacent trees to infiltrate the space. Nevertheless, the walls themselves were a testament to enduring craftsmanship, standing 2 feet thick, perfectly plumb, and as robust as the day they were erected. Callum descended into the foundation and placed his palm against the cool stone, mirroring a lesson imparted by Tobias. It felt cool, not frigid, and reassuringly stable. The earth maintained a consistent temperature of 55 degrees, even as the April air above retained the crispness of a Vermont spring. His mind was already engaged in the complex problem-solving required. A conventional wooden dwelling erected upon this foundation would possess superior warmth compared to most, yet it would lack distinction. It would not embody the groundbreaking design his grandfather had envisioned. His imperative was to devise a structure that would maximally utilize the thermal mass of the stone. He needed a concept that would foster an integrated system, wherein the basement would serve as the principal living area, while the superstructure above would provide both insulation and protection. He required an innovation that had yet to manifest. The solution presented itself 3 weeks later, serendipitously appearing in a newspaper advertisement. Surplus Quonset huts, available for purchase at a government auction for $300. Callum was familiar with Quonset huts. The military had deployed thousands of them during the recent conflict. These were characterized by their curved metal construction, enabling rapid assembly for the provision of shelter to troops and supplies. With the war concluded, The government was liquidating these structures by the hundreds. While many people perceived Quonset huts as utilitarian, temporary dwellings, prone to extreme temperatures in winter and summer, and suitable only for storage or workshops, Callum saw a different potential entirely. He recognized their perfect semi-cylindrical form, designed to shed snow and deflect wind. He envisioned a structure that could be firmly anchored to his grandfather's stone walls, thereby creating a sealed environment where the thermal mass of the basement would effectively regulate the temperature of the entire edifice, topped by a military-grade steel roof engineered for enduring generations. The more he contemplated this possibility, the more his excitement intensified. He journeyed to Boston by train and secured a Quonset hut that very same week. When the delivery truck arrived, depositing the curved steel segments onto the overgrown property, Callum's immediate neighbor emerged to observe the proceedings. Marcus Henderson, a man of 55 years, a prosperous farmer who had resided in Rutland County his entire life, positioned himself on horseback at the roadside, surveying the unloading with an undisguised air of disdain. "By the heavens! What do you intend to do with that contraption, young man?" Callum, then 34 years of age and unaccustomed to being addressed as a boy for 2 decades, calmly replied, "I intend to build a house." Marcus erupted in laughter so boisterous that he nearly tumbled from his horse. "A house? You plan to place that military refuse atop that ancient excavation and declare it a dwelling?" He shook his head, still chuckling. "Son, I have lived here for 30 years. No sane individual constructs a home in such a manner. You will perish from the cold come winter." Callum continued with the unloading of the steel sections. "We shall see," he stated. "Indeed, we shall see. Mark my words, you'll be trudging back to town, begging for a proper house with actual walls." Marcus turned his horse towards the road. "The orphaned boy fancies himself smarter than everyone else. That's rich. I can hardly wait to share this with the fellows at the tavern." Callum watched him depart before returning to his task. He had encountered skepticism before, and considerably more severe. Moreover, he had long since learned that the most effective method of silencing doubters was to demonstrably prove them mistaken. The work begins. The inaugural month was dedicated entirely to the meticulous clearing and preparation of the foundation. Callum labored in solitary fashion from dawn until dusk, manually expelling decades of accumulated detritus. This included fallen branches, decomposed leaves, soil that had ingressed through the makeshift covering his grandfather had erected to safeguard the structure, and the pervasive encroachment of tree roots. He meticulously inspected each stone comprising the walls, scrutinizing for any fissures, signs of displacement, or any indication of structural weakness. On the 18th day, his search yielded the discovery he had anticipated. An 8-foot section of the eastern wall had developed a significant crack, a consequence of a large oak root that had gradually insinuated itself between the stones over a period exceeding 50 years. The damage was substantial. If left unattended, the wall risked catastrophic failure under the substantial weight of the Quonset hut. A proper repair would necessitate the engagement of a professional mason, incurring an expense of at least $150, funds Callum did not possess. Word of the predicament disseminated with remarkable rapidity, as is often the case in smaller communities. Howard Petton arrived the following day, navigating his opulent automobile directly to the property's edge. He alighted, clad in his impeccably tailored overcoat, and surveyed the partially cleared foundation with a palpable sense of satisfaction. "I understand you've encountered some difficulties," Peton remarked, his voice laced with feigned sympathy. "A genuine pity about that wall." Callum continued his work, deliberately avoiding eye contact. "I remain amenable to acquiring this property," Peton pressed on, "for $200. That represents more than a fair offer for land burdened by a crumbling foundation." At this juncture, Callum finally looked up. "It is not for sale." "Consider the proposition, boy," Peton urged. "You lack the financial resources to repair that wall. You lack the requisite expertise. Your entire undertaking is doomed to collapse, and you are fully aware of it." Peton's smile broadened. "Accept the money. Purchase something practical for yourself. Cease this embarrassing charade." Callum relinquished his shovel and approached Peton's position. "My grandfather dedicated his entire existence to the aspiration of constructing something upon this very foundation," Callum stated quietly. "He held a profound reverence for the ancient methods, the accumulated wisdom of generations past. He believed that by understanding the fundamental principles of stone and earth, one could erect structures destined to endure eternally." He met Peton's gaze directly. "I made him a solemn promise to complete the endeavor he initiated. I do not renege on my commitments, particularly to the individual who preserved my life." Peton's smile receded. "You are a fool, and fools invariably meet with failure." "Perhaps," Callum conceded, "but I would rather embrace failure in the pursuit of a goal than achieve success by surrendering." He returned to his labor. After a brief interval, he heard the receding sound of Peton's automobile. That evening Callum sat within the partially excavated foundation, poring over his grandfather's journal by the flickering light of a lantern. The solution, he was certain, resided within its pages. 4 generations of Ashford knowledge, meticulously chronicled. Surely some antecedent within his lineage must have confronted a comparable predicament. On page 47 he found it, a detailed treatise on Cornish wall repair techniques. The entry stipulated, "For fissures within fitted stone walls, mortar is not an absolute necessity. Prepare a mixture comprising 3 parts lime, 2 parts river sand, and 1 part local clay. Firmly pack this compound into the fissures. Subsequently, reposition any dislodged stones utilizing the puzzle-fitting methodology. Each stone must interlock seamlessly with its neighbors. Allow a curing period of 3 weeks before subjecting the wall to load." Below this instructive text was an intricate diagram illustrating precisely how the stones should be precisely fitted together, interlocking like components of a 3-dimensional puzzle, deriving their structural integrity from their own inherent weight and the surrounding earth pressure. Callum read the entry multiple times, internalizing every minute detail. His grandfather had maintained a supply of lime in the farm's storage shed, remnants from prior construction projects. The river was located a mere half-mile distant. The clay bank situated behind the property had been a source for generations of Ashfords. He did not require a professional mason. He required 3 weeks and the invaluable knowledge bequeathed to him by his grandfather. The repair process consumed precisely 21 days. Callum meticulously combined the lime, sand, and clay in the exact proportions delineated in the journal. He carefully extracted the fractured stones, meticulously cleaned their surfaces, and meticulously reset them one by one, fitting each component into its rightful position, as if assembling an intricate three-dimensional jigsaw. His hands bore the raw marks of handling the abrasive stone, frequently cracking and bleeding. His back ached relentlessly from the continuous stooping and lifting. On certain nights, he was so utterly depleted that he could barely extricate himself from the foundation, opting to sleep directly upon the cool stone floor. Nevertheless, the wall gradually coalesced. By the conclusion of the third week, the repaired section was utterly indistinguishable from the original construction. The stones fit with such flawless precision that not even a sliver of paper could be inserted between them. Throughout this arduous period, two individuals extended their assistance. The first was Martha Briggs, a widow of 78 years, who resided in solitude within a modest farmhouse approximately 1 mile distant. She had been acquainted with Tobias Ashford for decades, having witnessed his persistent dedication to countless projects with the same quiet tenacity that Callum now exhibited. Every few days, she would journey to the property, bearing a basket filled with bread and soup. "Your grandfather would be immensely proud," she remarked one afternoon, observing Callum's diligent efforts. He spoke of this foundation constantly. He asserted it represented the most exceptional stonework the family had ever produced. Did he ever articulate what he envisioned building upon it? Martha offered a gentle smile. He conceived of a multitude of possibilities over the years, but they all ultimately converged on a singular objective, a dwelling that would provide warmth and shelter to his family, irrespective of the severities that winter might impose. A home that would serve as irrefutable evidence that the ancestral methods retained their inherent efficacy. The second individual to offer aid was Sven Lindqvist, a 52-year-old blacksmith who had emigrated from Sweden 20 years prior. Sven surveyed the foundation and the Quonset hut components with a slow, appraising nod. "In my homeland, we refer to this as Jordkelare, meaning earth shelter. We have employed this construction technique for centuries." He ran his rough hands over the meticulously fitted stones of the repaired wall. "This is exemplary craftsmanship, truly exceptional." "Did your grandfather impart this knowledge to you?" Callum affirmed with a nod. "A wise man, your grandfather. Contemporary individuals often erroneously believe that novelty inherently signifies superiority. They neglect to recognize that ancient practices endure because they demonstrably function." Sven placed a hearty clap upon Callum's shoulder. "Should you require any assistance with metal fabrication, particularly welding the framework, do not hesitate to approach me. There will be no charge. I am eager to witness the completion of this residence." Construction and criticism. June ushered in milder weather, presenting the genuine challenge of erecting the Quonset hut atop the stone foundation. The structure arrived in modular sections, curved steel ribs designed to bolt together, forming the distinctive semi-cylindrical silhouette. The accompanying military assembly instructions were formulated for teams of highly trained engineers, not for a solitary individual working in isolation. Callum dedicated 3 days to studying these directives before ultimately discarding them and devising his own systematic approach. He constructed a temporary wooden framework, a series of supports intended to temporarily secure each steel rib in its designated position, while he proceeded with the installation of the subsequent segment. He ingeniously rigged a pulley system, utilizing ropes and counterweights, which enabled him to hoist the 80-pound sections without external assistance. Sven provided his expertise twice weekly, contributing his welding skills to join the steel ribs to custom-fabricated brackets. Callum had specifically designed these brackets to firmly anchor the structure to the underlying stone walls. These brackets engaged the stone surface without the necessity of drilling into it, thereby meticulously preserving the integrity of the century-old masonry. Throughout this complex construction process, the persistent skeptics continued to observe. Marcus Henderson frequently rode by, invariably offering a fresh prediction of impending disaster. "That metal will surely buckle under the immense weight of the snow," he would declare. "Mark my words, the foundation simply cannot sustain that load. You will awaken one morning to find the entire edifice collapsed around your ears. Even if it miraculously remains standing, it will be as frigid as an icebox. Metal simply does not retain heat." Callum, unwavering in his resolve, never engaged in debate. He simply persisted with his work. Dr. Franklin Holloway, a retired engineer of 58 years who had overseen the construction of numerous bridges and factories throughout New England, visited one afternoon. He meticulously circled the construction site on 3 separate occasions, diligently recording his observations in a small notebook. "Structurally questionable," he announced to Marcus and the modest assembly of onlookers. "The differential thermal expansion coefficients between steel and granite are significant. As temperatures fluctuate, the points of junction will experience considerable stress, ultimately leading to failure." Marcus nodded sagely, as if he possessed an intimate understanding of thermal expansion coefficients. "The young man is entirely out of his depth," Dr. Holloway concluded decisively. "This structure will not withstand its inaugural winter." Father Bernard O'Brien, the 66-year-old clergyman from the local church, also conveyed his apprehensions, albeit in more spiritual terms. "Pride goeth before a fall, my son," he admonished, observing Callum wrestling a steel rib into its intended position. "There is profound wisdom inherent in tradition, in adhering to established practices. This," he gestured towards the peculiar, partially constructed edifice, "represents sheer hubris." Callum paused his strenuous activity. "Father, my grandfather's lineage has been engaged in stonemasonry for 4 generations. They acquired techniques that trace their origins back through centuries. Does that not constitute tradition?" The priest appeared perplexed. "That is an entirely different matter." "In what way?" Father O'Brien found himself without a ready answer. Billy Tanner emerged as the most vocal among the detractors. At 25 years of age, he was the scion of one of the region's most affluent families, a young man who had never undertaken a single day of honest labor and felt entitled to express opinions on every conceivable subject. "I'll wager $10 that the house collapses before Christmas," Billy loudly proclaimed at the general store. "Is anyone willing to take that bet?" Several individuals readily accepted. Within a week, a running tally was established at the local tavern, complete with odds dictating the precise timing and manner of Callum's anticipated project failure. Phoebe visited the construction site for the initial time in late July. She stood at the edge of the foundation, her daughters Clara and Rosie holding her hands, gazing down at the partially completed structure with an expression Callum could not readily decipher. "The women in town are abuzz," she stated quietly. "They always are. They claim you are squandering resources. They contend you are jeopardizing your own life. They even suggest," she paused, that I should attempt to instill some measure of reason into your actions." Callum climbed out of the foundation and stood beside her. "And what are your thoughts on the matter?" Phoebe remained silent for a considerable duration. Then she met his gaze, and Callum perceived an emotion in her eyes that caused his heart to swell with an overwhelming sense of affirmation. "I believe your grandfather was the most perceptive individual I have ever encountered," she declared, "and I am convinced he would not have entrusted you with this undertaking unless he harbored an unwavering faith in your capacity for success." She gently squeezed his hand. "Proceed with the construction of your home, Callum. I shall be present upon its completion." The final touches. By September, the Quonset hut had been fully assembled. Its gracefully curved steel roof arched over the stone foundation like a protective carapace. However, the demanding work was far from concluded. The uninsulated steel walls of the Quonset hut would inevitably transform the dwelling into a frigid chamber during winter and an oven during the summer months. Callum dedicated the subsequent month to meticulously constructing an insulation layer on the interior surface of the structure. He diligently gathered every available material: wool blankets generously donated by Martha Briggs, fiberglass batting salvaged from an abandoned construction site, discarded newspapers and cardboard boxes procured from the general store. Layer by painstaking layer, he erected a 6-inch barrier between the external steel skin and the interior living space, ingeniously creating thousands of minute air pockets designed to effectively trap and retain heat. He installed a cast-iron stove in the basement level, positioning it strategically against the eastern wall, where its generated warmth would radiate efficiently into the surrounding stone. He then constructed a sturdy wooden staircase, establishing a crucial connection between the basement and the upper level within the Quonset hut. He incorporated windows to allow the ingress of natural light, painstakingly sealing each one to prevent any unwelcome drafts. The basement was subsequently repurposed as the primary living area, a capacious open expanse featuring a functional kitchen at one end, a comfortable seating arrangement near the stove, and a small, cozy alcove designated for storage. The upper level, nestled within the Quonset hut's confines, accommodated 2 compact bedrooms and a versatile loft space intended for the children. In early October, with the initial frost